Henry Harpending. Some people say that race is not really a biological category at all. In fact, it's nothing more than a social construct. How would you respond to that?
Well, it seems like an awfully silly thing to say. Race in the sense of humans being different from each other, our continental populations different from each other. Sure they are. Breeds of dogs are too. But there's also hybrids between breeds. There's a whole spectrum of dogs that you can find that have all kinds of ancestry. So if you want to say dog breeds are a social construct, you're welcome to. I can't imagine why you'd make a point of saying that, because the underlying biology, my 10-year-old kid knew that.
So race is real to some degree.
Human differences are real. And whether you want to call them races or subspecies or breeds, I don't care. It's not a question that has an answer, because it's just wordplay.
What would you say is the source of racial differences?
Well, that is interesting. In human genetics and in biology in general, we've gone through perhaps 40 or 50 years of assuming that the differences in the genomes of different organisms reflect random processes called genetic drift. That our DNA just sort of sits there and reproduces itself, but there isn't a lot of selection going on. This is called neutralism, and it has been very popular in biology, frankly, because it makes the mathematics easy. So it's easy to analyze data in terms of neutral theory. So this famous quip of Lewontin's that only 15% of our diversity is between groups reflects that idea that we can treat human genetic diversity like paint, and you can have a little bit of this color and a little bit of that color, and you mix them together and they mix. But when most people talk about race, they're talking about things that are apparent and visible, like your skin color. That doesn't follow Lewontin's quip of 15% to 85%. These are probably caused by selection. Now, the most interesting thing that's happened in human genetics in the last 10 years is the discovery that a whole lot of our genome is under selection, that it is driven by selective differences between genetic variants in different areas.
Can you expand on that a bit for me?
Well, Africans, most sub-Saharan Africans, have a broken immune system receptor called Duffy. And it turns out that if that is broken, you don't suffer very much from Vivax malaria. It's a broken gene that protects you against Vivax malaria. So the reason that Africans are Duffy negative and people elsewhere are not is because of malaria, and only malaria, Vivax malaria, benign tertian malaria. That difference is not just a sort of random consequence of the accidents of history. It's caused by the environment, by selection. The same is true for sickle cell anemia. It is looking as if a lot of the well-known Northern European Jewish diseases,
Tay-Sachs.
Like Tay-Sachs, like Canavan's disease, like idiopathic torsion dystonia. There's a whole list of them. They all play with your central nervous system, and there's evidence that a number of them, if you only have one copy, you're a so-called heterozygote or a carrier, boost your IQ. This is selection. It's not just random. The accepted wisdom for many years is that all these Jewish diseases are consequences of inbreeding in a bottleneck, that somehow they were reduced to a very few number of founders. Well, today we can look at directly at the genomes, at the gene sequences. There's no trace of a bottleneck, absolutely no bottleneck. They have more diversity than Europeans. So what used to be loose talk in the playground for talkers and demagogues, we have evidence now and data, and we can say without any doubt at all that these things are due to selection.
By selection, are we talking about our Darwinian process?
Absolutely Darwinian, sure. We know enough about Jewish history to know that at least from the time of Charlemagne in the early Middle Ages, they were restricted to white-collar jobs. They were managers. They were tax collectors, tax farmers, diplomats, and they were restricted for many reasons from doing other jobs, like having a farm. And we also know that successful individuals had twice as many surviving children as poor Jews. So every generation, you're putting people into this pure white-collar environment. Those who succeed can afford a wet nurse, they can afford firewood, they have a house in the country when the plague comes. We know lots of the details. Every generation, they're having twice as many children as the folks who don't quite make it. And what rapid environmental change like this does, I mean, and for Jews, that was a big environmental change. You're taking Middle Eastern farmers, sticking them in the North European plain, and saying, you know, good luck. This is a tremendous environmental change, and whenever you have a big environmental change, you get selection for many things that are kind of quick fixes, like sickle cell anemia in black people. But in the long run, then they cause their own problems, like Tay-Sachs disease in Jews, or sickle cell anemia in people from tropical Africa. Probably connexin 26 deafness in Europeans seems to fit this pattern. There's lots of these that are known, and they're pouring out of the data producers like a flood, like a waterfall. Nobody can keep up with all the new information.
Does this flood of new data coming in reinforce your beliefs, or does it cause you to question them?
Well, I think I've internalized the viewpoint of science, and that is that you don't believe anything. You try to disbelieve, you try to disprove things. And what is left is things that you can't falsify. So I'm always skeptical, just because that's the way it works. And in fact, when any of us, most of us, encounter a scientist who is telling us the way things are and is a true believer, we completely dismiss him. Don't pay any attention to him. This is all of science. Most of us don't. Not most. Many of us don't pay a lot of attention to the global warming stuff because it's full of true believers. And anytime you see a true believer in science, you walk the other way, or at least scientists do. Unfortunately, many journalists don't, and so we have lots of well-known facts like race being a social construct that aren't true, but a lot of people know them because they've been told them.
What would you say to the person that says all of this science is just a way of hiding a deep-seated racism?
Well, there's an old joke from the 70s about a psychiatrist who walks out of his apartment in the morning, walks down the street, walks by a guy he doesn't know, and the guy says, "Good morning." And the psychiatrist thinks a minute and says, "I wonder what he meant by that." And this business of, psychoanalyzing everyone, figuring out what they're true deep motivations are, there's no answer, and it's hardly worth thinking about, in my opinion. It became acceptable to call people racists in the 70s, and I think by 3 or 4 years after that, it had lost all its punch, and none of us pay much attention. You're welcome to call me a racist. It's completely lost its meaning.